The war had been going wrong for 11 months, and High Commander Cirith still could not understand why. The Dreven Dominion possessed superior technology. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their soldiers bred for combat across 3,000 years of genetic refinement. When they had declared war on the human territories, every military projection showed total victory within 6 months. Now those projections sat in classified files, marked as failures. Cirith stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing frustration. Another fleet engagement had ended in disaster. 37 Dreven warships destroyed. Human losses, 12 vessels. The numbers made no sense. The humans should have lost 50 ships at minimum based on the firepower involved. But humans did not fight the way they were supposed to fight. They anticipated ambushes that should have been impossible to detect. They survived damage that should have destroyed their ships. They coordinated across vast distances with a speed that suggested some form of telepathy, though scans showed no such capability. Cirith needed answers. Traditional intelligence gathering had failed. Captured human soldiers either died under interrogation or provided information that later proved to be deliberate misdirection. The humans seemed to view deception as an art form that a new approach was required. "We will capture civilian specimens," Cirith announced to his senior staff. "Military personnel are trained to resist. Civilians are not. We will perform deep biological scans to understand what makes these creatures so dangerous." The order went out to all patrol fleets: capture human civilians alive. Priority targets were children, whose biology would be uncorrupted by military training or augmentation. 3 weeks later, a Dreven raiding party intercepted a damaged civilian transport fleeing the Kerrigan colony. The transport had taken debris damage during the colony's evacuation and was limping toward the nearest safe port. It never arrived. Among the 47 humans captured were a wounded man named David and his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. David had taken shrapnel to his shoulder and leg during the evacuation. He was barely conscious when Dreven soldiers dragged him from the transport's medical bay. But he became very conscious when he saw them reaching for his daughter. He killed 2 soldiers with his bare hands before they subdued him. The Dreven officer in charge noted this in his report with clinical interest. The human had been severely injured, blood loss significant, yet he had still managed to terminate 2 fully armored Dreven warriors. The officer recommended the man for immediate study. Lily watched her father fight. She watched him fall. She watched the soldiers bind his wounds just enough to keep him alive for transport. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply watched with calm brown eyes that seemed to record everything. When a soldier grabbed her arm to move her, she went without resistance. But she looked up at him and asked a simple question: "Are you going to hurt my daddy?" The soldier did not answer. He did not know how to answer. In 300 years of Dreven warfare, no captured child had ever asked such a direct question with such steady composure. The prisoners were transported to the Dominion's premier research vessel, the Enlightenment. It was a massive ship designed for scientific study, equipped with the most advanced scanning technology in known space. Hundreds of species had been analyzed within its laboratories. Their secrets had become Dreven weapons. Cirith arrived personally to oversee the operation. This was too important to delegate. Dr. Mavel, the ship's lead xenobiologist, greeted him with appropriate deference but visible unease. Mavel had studied many species. He had never been asked to study one that was actively at war with the Dominion. "The child is isolated in Laboratory 7, Mavel reported. "The father is in the medical wing under heavy sedation. His injuries required treatment before he could survive scanning." "Begin with the child," Cirith ordered. "Her biology will be simpler to analyze. Find me their weakness, doctor. Find me something we can exploit." Mavel bowed and departed. In Laboratory 7, Lily sat on a metal examination table, her legs dangling over the edge. The room was cold and sterile, filled with equipment she did not recognize. Strange lights blinked on strange machines. The air smelled like chemicals. She was scared. Of course she was scared. She was 7 years old, alone on an alien ship, separated from her injured father. but Grandma had taught her something important. Fear was just a feeling. Feelings came and went like weather. What mattered was what you did while the feelings were happening to us. Oh, Lily did what Grandma would have done. She paid attention. She counted the guards outside her door. 2. She noted the rhythm of their patrol. Every 15 minutes, one would look through the window. She studied the machines around her, trying to understand their purpose. She listened to the sounds of the ship, learning its heartbeat. When Dr. Mavil entered the laboratory, Lily looked up at him with those calm brown eyes. Mavil stopped in the doorway. He had examined hundreds of alien specimens. Prisoners were usually terrified, aggressive, or catatonic. This child was none of those things. She was watching him the way a scientist watches a specimen. "Hello," Lily said. "Are you the doctor?" Mavil found himself answering before he could stop himself. "Yes, I am Dr. Mavil. Is my daddy okay? He is receiving medical treatment." Lily nodded, processing this information. "Good. He got hurt protecting me. He always protects me." She paused, then tilted her head slightly. "You have sad eyes," she observed. "Why are your eyes sad?" Mavil had no answer. He turned away and began preparing his scanning equipment, disturbed in a way he could not name. He was the researcher here. He was the one in control. But somehow, in this cold laboratory on this massive warship, he felt like the experiment had already begun, and he was not certain who was studying whom. The scanning equipment hummed to life, filling Laboratory 7 with a soft blue glow. Doctor Mavil worked with practiced efficiency, calibrating sensors and adjusting frequencies. He had performed this procedure thousands of times on hundreds of species. The process was routine, clinical, scientific, but the subject was not routine. Lily sat perfectly still on the examination platform, watching the lights dance around her with curious eyes. She did not flinch when the scanning array began its first pass. She did not cry when the deep tissue probes activated. "Does it hurt?" Mavil asked, surprised by his own question. He never asked specimens if procedures hurt. Pain was simply data. "No," Lily said. "It tingles a little, like when your foot falls asleep." She smiled at him. Mavil turned back to his monitors, unsettled. He focused on the data streaming across his screens, letting the numbers ground him in familiar territory. The initial results were unremarkable. Human biology was soft, fragile, slow. Lily's skeletal structure showed calcium base bones that would shatter under impacts a driven child could easily survive. Her muscle density was minimal. Her reflexes, measured against driven standards, were practically sluggish. On paper, humans should be prey animals. They should have been conquered in the first week of the war. Mavil dug deeper. The immune system scan stopped him cold. Lily's blood contained antibodies for diseases that had not existed on Earth for millions of years. Her genetic code carried the memory of ancient plagues, bacterial terrors, and viral nightmares that had killed billions of her ancestors. And her body had defeated them all. Not her personally, of course. She was only 7. But her species had fought these invisible enemies for so long that victory was written into her very cells. Mavil ran the numbers 3 times. He could not believe them. Humans did not just survive diseases. They absorbed them. They adapted. They passed that adaptation to their children and their children's children, building an immune system that treated biological warfare as a minor inconvenience. The Driven had biological weapons. They had considered using them against humanity. Mavil quietly flagged that option as inadvisable. He moved to the endocrine system scan and found another impossibility: that Lily's adrenal glands were small, underdeveloped, appropriate for a child her age. But the potential output they could achieve under stress was staggering. Adult humans, according to the scan projections, could flood their bodies with combat chemicals at levels that would stop a driven heart instantly. They called it adrenaline. Under its influence, humans could ignore pain, multiply their strength, and push their bodies far beyond safe operational limits. They could lift objects twice their weight. They could continue fighting with injuries that should render them unconscious. They could kill 2 armored soldiers while bleeding from multiple wounds. Like Lily's father had done. Mavil's hands trembled slightly as he initiated the neural scan. The results made him sit down. Human brains were not exceptional by galactic standards. They were slower than driven neural processing, less efficient than synthetic intelligences, smaller than several other sentient species. But they had one feature that Mavel had never seen in any other organism: redundancy. Human neural pathways duplicated themselves constantly. If one pathway was damaged, another could take over. If an entire brain region was destroyed, the surrounding tissue could learn to compensate. Humans could think through damage that would leave any other species catatonic or dead. They could lose portions of their brains and continue functioning, continue reasoning, continue planning. They were not just hard to kill. They were hard to stop. Mavel saved his data and sat in silence for a long moment. The blue scanning lights had dimmed, leaving the laboratory in shadow. Dr. Mavel. Lily's voice broke his concentration. She was still sitting on the examination platform, patient and composed. Yes, can I ask you a question? Mavel hesitated. Scientific protocol said no. Subjects did not ask questions. Subjects answer questions, but he nodded anyway. Why are you sad? Lily asked. Your eyes were sad before, and now they are even sadder. Did the scan show something bad? Mavel stared at her. She was 7 years old. She was a prisoner on an enemy ship. She was being examined like a laboratory specimen, and she was asking about his emotional state. The scan showed many things, he said carefully. I am processing the information. Lily nodded, accepting this. My daddy says processing feelings is important. He says you have to feel them all the way through, or they get stuck inside you and make you sick. She paused. Are you sick, Dr. Mavel? No, he said. I'm not sick. Good. She smiled again. I do not want you to be sick. You seem nice. You have gentle hands. Mavel looked at his hands. They were clawed, scaled, designed for precision work. They were the hands of a scientist who had dissected countless organisms. Gentle was not a word anyone had ever used to describe them. Lily, he said, using her name for the first time, I need to ask you some questions. For my research. Will you answer them? Okay. Do you know why your people are fighting this war? Lily thought about it carefully. Daddy says you attacked first. He says you wanted to take our worlds and make us leave. He says we could not leave because those worlds are our homes. Do you hate us for attacking? Another careful pause. I do not hate you. Grandma said hate is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to get sick. It only hurts you. Your grandmother sounded wise. She was. Lily's eyes grew distant. She died before the war. But she taught me lots of things. She said humans are good at surviving. She said we have been surviving for a very long time, and we will keep surviving no matter what happens. What else did she teach you? Lily looked directly at him, and for a moment, Mavel saw something ancient in her young eyes. Something that had watched ice ages come and go. Something that had walked through fire and plague and disaster and emerged stronger. She taught me that being scared is okay, Lily said. Everyone gets scared. What matters is what you do while you are scared. You can still be brave. You can still be kind. You can still think clearly. She glanced around the laboratory at the machines and the lights and the cold metal walls. I'm scared right now, she admitted, but I'm still thinking clearly. And I'm trying to be kind, even to you. Mavel realized, with a cold certainty that settled into his bones, that this child was not a specimen. She was a warning. And he was only beginning to understand what humanity truly was. Sleep did not come easily to Dr. Mavel that night. He lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scanned data in his mind. The numbers were burned into his memory now. Immune systems that absorbed plagues, adrenal responses that defied biological limits, brains that refused to stop working even when damaged. But numbers alone did not explain the war. Numbers did not explain why human fleets fought with such coordinated ferocity. Numbers did not explain why captured humans chose death over surrender. Numbers did not explain the look in a 7-year-old girl's eyes when she said she was scared but still thinking clearly. Mavel needed context. He needed history. At 3 hours past midnight, he accessed the Dominion's classified archives and requested all captured human historical records. The files were enormous. Human civilization had been spacefaring for only 4 centuries, a blink of an eye by galactic standards. But they had been recording their history for thousands of years before that. They had written on clay, on paper, on digital networks. They had preserved their past with obsessive dedication. Mavil began reading .by dawn. He understood why the war was going wrong. Earth was a death world, not officially classified as such, because humans had hidden the truth during their initial diplomatic contacts. They had presented their home world as a pleasant, temperate planet suitable for organic life. They had not mentioned the details. The details were horrifying. Earth had experienced 5 major extinction events before humans even evolved. Asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, ice ages that covered entire continents. The planet had killed 90% of its own species multiple times, and life had simply started over and kept going. Humans evolved in this environment. They were not the strongest predators on their world, not the fastest, not the most venomous. They survived by being adaptable, by thinking, by refusing to die when every environmental factor said they should. But the planet was not the worst part. The worst part was what humans did to each other. Mavil read about human wars with growing disbelief. Millions dead over religious disagreements. Tens of millions dead over political ideologies. Entire generations destroyed because one group of humans wanted resources that another group possessed. They had developed weapons capable of destroying cities in a single blast. They had used them twice against their own kind. They had invented biological weapons that could kill millions. They had banned these weapons, not from fear, but because they considered them unsportsmanlike. The horror was not in the existence of such weapons. The horror was in the casual way humans discussed them, as if mass extinction was simply a tactical option to be weighed against other tactical options. Mavil found a human military concept called total war and felt his blood turn cold. Total war meant the complete mobilization of a civilization's resources for conflict. It meant no distinction between soldiers and civilians. It meant factories, farms, cities, and populations all became legitimate targets. It meant fighting until one side was completely destroyed or completely surrendered. The Driven waged war to conquer. They fought to expand territory, acquire resources, demonstrate dominance. When victory became too costly, they negotiated. This was civilized. This was rational. Humans waged war to survive. When their existence was threatened, they did not negotiate. They did not calculate cost versus benefit. They simply fought until the threat was eliminated or they were dead. There was no middle ground. And they had been practicing this kind of war against each other for their entire existence as a species. The Driven had been at war with humanity for 11 months. Humans had been at war with themselves for 11,000 years. Mavil closed the archive files and sat in silence. His quarters felt very small suddenly. The walls seemed to press inward. He thought about the scan data. He thought about the historical records. He thought about a small girl sitting calmly on an examination table, watching him with eyes that had seen ice ages and plagues and nuclear fire in their genetic memory. "We are not fighting a species," he whispered to himself. "We are fighting a survival machine." His console chimed. A message from High Commander Sirith. "Report to the command center immediately. Bring your preliminary findings." Mavil gathered his data pads and walked through the corridors of the Enlightenment. The ship's crew moved around him, going about their duties with quiet efficiency. They did not know what he knew. They still believed this war could be won through superior firepower and tactical excellence. They were wrong. In the command center, Sirith waited with barely concealed impatience. The High Commander was a warrior born and bred, decorated in a dozen campaigns, respected throughout the Dominion. He had never lost a war that he did not intend to start now. "Your report, Dr." Sirith commanded. Mavil presented his biological findings first. The immune system data, the adrenal response projections, the neural redundancy patterns. He watched Sirith's expression shift from impatience to interest to something that might have been concern. "Impressive," Sirith admitted, "but not insurmountable. We have defeated resilient species before. With respect, High Commander, I do not believe you understand the full picture." Mavil activated the historical archive displays. He showed Cirith the extinction events, the ice ages, the plagues. Then he showed him the wars, the human wars. Cirith watched in silence as images of human conflict scrolled across the screens. Trenches filled with bodies, cities reduced to ash, mushroom clouds rising over obliterated populations. They did this to themselves? Cirith asked quietly. Yes, repeatedly, for thousands of years. Why? Because they could not agree on territory, or religion, or political systems, or resources. Mavel paused. Or simply because one group decided another group should not exist. Cirith stared at the screens for a long moment. And they are still here, he said. Despite all of this, they are still here. Yes, High Commander, they're still here. Mavel watched the realization dawn in Cirith's eyes. It was a terrible thing to witness. A proud warrior, undefeated in battle, suddenly understanding that he had declared war on something that could not be defeated through conventional means, something that had been defeating itself for millennia and kept coming back stronger. The child, Cirith said slowly, the one you scanned. What did she say when you examined her? Mavel remembered Lily's calm eyes, her gentle questions, her grandmother's wisdom. She said she was scared, Mavel replied, but she was still thinking clearly. She was still being kind. Cirith turned away from the screens. I want to speak with her myself, he said. Mavel wanted to refuse. But he was a scientist, not a commander. He simply nodded and led the way to Laboratory 7, where a 7-year-old girl waited to teach a High Commander about fear. High Commander Cirith had faced enemies across a dozen star systems. He had stood on burning battlefields while plasma fire screamed overhead. He had commanded fleets against species that considered war sacred art. He had looked into the eyes of dying warriors and watched the light fade without flinching. He had never been intimidated by a child. Until now. Lily sat on the same examination platform where Mavel had scanned her, her small legs dangling over the edge. She wore the same simple clothes she had been captured in. Her brown hair was tangled from sleep. She looked exactly like what she was, a frightened 7-year-old girl, far from home, surrounded by enemies. But her eyes were not frightened. Her eyes watched Cirith enter the laboratory with calm, careful attention. They tracked his movements, noted his posture, evaluated his threat level. They were the eyes of a creature that had learned to assess danger in the womb. Cirith stopped in the center of the room, towering over her. He was twice her height and 4 times her mass. His uniform displayed the medals of his conquests. His claws could tear through metal. Lily looked up at him and waited. Do you know who I am? Cirith asked. You are important, Lily said. Dr. Mavel was nervous when you came in. He is not nervous around other people. Cirith glanced at Mavel, who stood near the door. The doctor's expression confirmed the child's observation. She had noticed. She had analyzed. She had drawn conclusions that in less than 10 seconds. I am High Commander Cirith, he said. I lead the forces fighting against your people. Oh, Lily considered this. Are you winning? The question was innocent, a child's question, but it struck Cirith like a blade between his ribs. The war continues, he said carefully. Lily nodded. Daddy says that is what adults say when things are not going well. He says grown-ups use big words to hide small truths. Cirith felt something shift in his chest. Anger, perhaps, or something colder. I came here to ask you questions, he said, about your people, about how they fight, about their weaknesses. I am 7, Lily said. I do not know about fighting. I know about school and playing and helping Daddy cook dinner. Then tell me about those things. Lily tilted her head, surprised. Why? Because I want to understand humans. And you are a human. For a long moment, Lily was silent. She seemed to be deciding something. Then she looked directly at Cirith with those ancient, watchful eyes. I will tell you a story instead, she said. My grandma told it to me. Is that okay? Cirith nodded, not sure why he was agreeing. When Grandma was little, there was a bad time on Earth, Lily began. The weather changed and lots of things broke. Food was hard to find. People were scared and angry, and sometimes they hurt each other. She paused, organizing her thoughts the way children do when reciting something important. Grandma lived in a place with mountains. When the bad time came, her family had to leave. They had to walk to a safe place far away. It was very cold because it was winter. Grandma was only 8, 1 year older than me. Sirith listened. Mavil listened. The laboratory was silent except for the soft hum of equipment. On the second day, Grandma fell down a hill and broke her leg. It hurt very much. She could not walk. Her parents had to carry her baby brother, so they could not carry her too. They thought maybe they would have to leave her behind. Lily's voice was steady, not dramatic, just telling the truth. But Grandma would not let them leave her. She found a big stick and used it to help her walk. Every step hurt. Every step felt like fire in her leg. But she kept walking. For 200 kilometers. Through snow and ice and wind. With a broken leg. That is impossible, Sirith said. A child with a broken leg cannot walk 200 kilometers. Lily looked at him with something like pity. Grandma said the hard part is never the dying, she continued. The hard part is deciding to keep living anyway. Once you decide, your body follows. It does not matter what is broken. It does not matter what hurts. You just keep going. She smiled, a small and gentle smile. Grandma made it to the safe place. Her leg healed crooked, but she could still walk. She grew up and had children and then grandchildren. She lived until she was 92. She died in her bed, surrounded by family, with a smile on her face. Lily looked at the medals on Sirith's chest. That is what humans do, she said. We decide to keep living. And then we do. The silence in the laboratory was absolute. Sirith stood frozen, his mind processing the story. A child with a broken leg, walking through frozen wilderness, refusing to die. A grandmother who survived catastrophe and lived for almost a century afterward. It was just one story. One human, one small life. But Sirith understood suddenly that there were billions of such stories. Billions of humans who had decided to keep living despite everything the universe threw at them. Billions of stubborn, impossible survival decisions happening every day. Why are you telling me this? He asked quietly. That Lily's eyes met his without fear. Because you look scared, she said. I thought maybe a story would help. Sirith felt something crack inside him. Not his composure, not his dignity. Something deeper, that he was High Commander of the Dreven Dominion. He had conquered worlds. He had broken empires. And a 7-year-old girl had just told him a bedtime story because she thought he looked scared. She was right, that he was terrified. Dr. Mavil, Sirith said, his voice strange in his own ears. Continue your research. Compile a full report. I want every piece of data you can extract from the archives. He turned and walked toward the door, then stopped. The child's father, he said without turning around. See that his medical treatment continues. Keep them both comfortable. Yes, High Commander. Sirith left the laboratory and walked through the corridors of his ship. His crew saluted him as he passed. They saw only their leader, proud and undefeated. They did not see the truth. They did not see that their High Commander had just received a warning wrapped in a grandmother's story. A warning from species that had walked through fire and ice and nuclear devastation and simply kept going to the species that decided to live and then did. And no matter what I in Laboratory 7, Lily watched him go with calm brown eyes. He is very sad, she told Dr. Mavil, and very scared. I hope the story helped. Mavil had no words, that he simply stared at the door where Sirith had disappeared, wondering if the High Commander understood what he had just witnessed, a child of humanity, being kind to her captor. Because that was what humans did. They survived. And they chose kindness anyway. The Dominion War Council met in a chamber of cold stone and colder silence. Point 12 of the most powerful beings in Dreven space sat around a curved table, their faces illuminated by holographic displays. Fleet admirals, territorial gobiernos, intelligence directors. They represented the combined military and political might of 3,000 years of conquest. Dr. Mavil stood at the center of the chamber, feeling very small. High Commander Sirith had ordered him to present his findings to the full council. It was not a request. Mavil had spent 3 days compiling his data, running projections, checking his calculations over and over again. He wished the numbers were wrong. They were not wrong. Proceed, Doctor, Sirith said from his seat at the head of the table. Mavel activated the holographic display and began. My analysis is based on comprehensive biological scans of human subjects, combined with historical archives captured during the war. I will present my findings in 3 categories: biological advantages, psychological resilience, and strategic projections. He showed them the immune system data first. The council watched in silence as Mavel explained how human bodies carried the genetic memory of ancient plagues, how their cells had adapted to survive diseases that would devastate driven populations. Biological weapons are not recommended, Mavel concluded. Human immune systems would adapt within generations. The weapons would become ineffective, and humanity would survive. He moved to the adrenal response data. The council shifted uncomfortably as Mavel displayed the chemical output levels humans could achieve under stress. Under combat conditions, human soldiers can temporarily exceed their normal physical limits by a factor of 3 to 4. Pain suppression is nearly complete. Rational thought is maintained even during maximum adrenaline output. They do not panic. They become more dangerous. One of the admirals spoke. Our soldiers can achieve similar states through chemical enhancement, with significant side effects and recovery time, Mavel replied. Humans achieve this naturally, without enhancement, and recover within hours. They can repeat this cycle indefinitely until their bodies physically fail. And their neural redundancy systems mean physical failure occurs much later than in any other species we have encountered. He showed them the brain scans, the redundant pathways, the compensation systems. Humans can continue cognitive function with injuries that would render a driven comatose. They can lose significant portions of brain tissue and still fight, plan, and communicate. Disabling shots must be immediately fatal. Anything less will not stop them. The council was silent now. The initial skepticism had faded. They were beginning to understand. Mavel moved to psychological data. Human children develop strategic thinking capabilities by age 4. By age 7, they are capable of complex deception, long-term planning, and emotional manipulation. The child I examined had already assessed my psychological state, identified my weaknesses, and adapted her behavior accordingly. He paused. She is 7 years old. She has no military training. This is simply how humans develop. What about their weaknesses? Another counselor demanded. Every species has weaknesses. Mavel had dreaded this question. Human weaknesses are also their strengths, he said carefully. They form intense emotional bonds with family, friends, and even strangers. These bonds create vulnerabilities. If you harm one human, others will seek revenge. If you threaten their children, they will fight without any consideration for their own survival. He displayed historical data on human responses to attacks on civilian populations. During their internal wars, attacks on non-combatants did not demoralize human populations. They enraged them. Civilian casualties consistently increased recruitment, resource allocation, and willingness to accept extreme sacrifices. Attacking their families does not break humans. It unites them. Admiral Kress leaned forward. What are your strategic projections, Doctor? How do we win this war? Mavel took a breath. Based on my analysis, total conquest of human space would require approximately 300 years of sustained military operations. The chamber erupted. Counselors shouted. Admirals demanded explanations. Mavel stood still and waited for the noise to subside. I will explain, he said when they quieted. Human reproduction rates, combined with their adaptability, allow them to replace combat losses faster than any species in known space. For every human soldier we kill, their population will produce 2 more within a decade. Their industrial capacity scales with their population. Their technology advances through necessity. He showed them the projections, lines and numbers climbing steadily upward. We can win battles. We can even win campaigns. But humans learn from every defeat. They adapt their tactics. They develop new weapons. They find new ways to survive. After 300 years of war, our projections show that human military capability would exceed ours by a factor of 12. Then we exterminate them, Governor Trell said coldly. Total species elimination. It has been done before. Mavel had prepared for this too. I consider that option, he said quietly. I ran the numbers. He displayed the final projection. Genocide requires the destruction of approximately 40 billion humans across multiple star systems. Our current fleet capacity could accomplish this within 50 years, assuming no significant human resistance. He paused, but humans would resist. Significantly. Our projections show that an extermination campaign would trigger what humans call total war. Every human being, regardless of age or capability, would become a combatant. Their industrial output would shift entirely to military production. Their civilian population would become a guerrilla force of 40 billion fighters. The numbers climbed on the display. Conservative estimates suggest we would lose 70% of our fleet in such a campaign. We would win, eventually, but the cost would cripple the Dominion for centuries. Mavel looked at the Council with exhausted eyes. And even then, humans have demonstrated remarkable survival capabilities. Hidden colonies, generation ships, seed vaults with genetic material. If even a tiny percentage escaped our extermination, they would return. In 100 years, in 1,000 years, however long it took. He turned off the display. They would remember us. They would teach their children to remember us. And they would make certain that the Dreven Dominion never threatened them again. The chamber was silent. High Commander Sirith spoke at last. Your recommendation, Doctor? Mavel looked at the most powerful beings in Dreven space, gathered in their chamber of cold stone, and told them the truth. Do not give humanity a reason to remember us. No one argued, and no one could argue with the numbers. The numbers were terrifying, and the numbers did not lie. The prisoner transfer happened at a neutral zone between star systems. Far from any inhabited world, a single Dreven shuttle approached the designated coordinates, its weapons powered down, its shields lowered. Across the void, a human escort vessel waited with equal vulnerability. Both sides had agreed to these terms. Both sides kept their word. High Commander Sirith watched from the observation deck of the Enlightenment as the shuttle departed. He had made the decision personally, overriding objections from his intelligence officers. The prisoners would be returned, not as a peace offering. The Dominion could not admit weakness, not as a strategic gesture. The Council had rejected any appearance of surrender. Officially, it was documented as a demonstration of civilized warfare, a reminder that the Dreven were honorable conquerors, not barbarians. Sirith knew the truth. He simply wanted the child off his ship. He could not explain why her calm eyes haunted him. He could not articulate the terror he felt when she told him stories about her grandmother. He only knew that every hour she remained aboard, he felt the weight of something ancient and patient watching him, judging him. Finding him wanting to in the shuttle bay, David held his daughter with fierce desperation. His wounds had healed during his time aboard the research vessel. The Dreven doctors had been thorough, professional, almost gentle. He did not understand why. He did not care why. His daughter was alive. They were going home. Nothing else mattered. Lily pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the familiar smell of him. Safety, family, love. She had been brave for so long. Now, finally, she could stop being brave for a moment, but she pulled back before the shuttle doors opened and looked toward the observation windows high above the bay. Doctor Mavel stood there, watching. Lily raised her hand and waved. A small wave, a friendly wave, the kind of wave a child gives to someone who is nice to her. Mavel stood frozen. His clawed hand rose slowly, almost involuntarily, and returned the gesture. Then the shuttle doors sealed and the Dreven vessel was gone. 6 months later, the war ended. Not with a dramatic surrender. Not with a final decisive battle. The fighting simply decreased. Border skirmishes became less frequent. Fleet movements shifted from offensive to defensive postures. Trade negotiations began in quiet diplomatic channels, far from public attention. The official Dominion announcement cited strategic resource reallocation as the reason for the ceasefire. Military priorities had shifted. New threats required attention elsewhere. The human territories were no longer considered a priority expansion target. And '01 mentioned the classified report sitting in the War Council's archive. And '01 mentioned Dr. Maville's final recommendation. Do not give humanity a reason to remember us. The Dreven remembered. They would always remember. But they chose to become a footnote in human history rather than a target of human vengeance. That IT was the wisest decision they ever made on a rebuilt colony world called New Promise. Life slowly returned to normal. The refugees from Kerrigan Colony had settled in a small town surrounded by farmland and forests. The war had scarred them, but humans were good at healing scars. They rebuilt. They planted crops. They raised children. They told stories around dinner tables about the bad times, and they told jokes to make the bad times seem smaller. David worked in the town's repair shop, fixing machines and vehicles with steady hands. His legs still ached when the weather changed, a reminder of the shrapnel that had nearly killed him. But he walked without a limp, and he smiled more often now than he had during the war. Lily had started school again. She sat in classrooms with other children, learning mathematics and reading and the history of human space. She made friends. She played games at recess. She was, by all appearances, a normal 7-year-old girl. Almost normal. Sometimes her teachers noticed her watching them with calm, evaluating eyes. Sometimes her classmates found her quiet intensity unsettling. Sometimes she said things that seemed too wise for a child her age, but children were resilient. Everyone said so. She would grow out of it. One evening, David found Lily at the kitchen table with paper and colored pencils. She was drawing something with careful concentration. "What are you making, sweetheart?" Lily held up her picture. It showed a figure with scaled skin and sad eyes, surrounded by stars and scientific equipment. The colors were bright, but the expression was melancholy. "It is Dr. Maville," she said. "He was the doctor on the ship. He had gentle hands and sad eyes." David felt something cold touch his heart. He had not known she remembered so clearly. "Why are you drawing him?" Lily thought about it the way she always did, carefully and thoroughly. "He was nice to me," she said, "even though he was supposed to study me like a bug. He asked if the scans hurt. He used my name. He was scared of me, I think, but he was still gentle." She looked at her drawing with quiet satisfaction. "I hope the war stopping makes him happy. I hope he does not have to be scared anymore." David sat down heavily in the chair across from her. He looked at his daughter, this small miracle of resilience and kindness, and wondered what she had seen aboard that ship, what she had understood, what she had done. "Lily," he said softly, "were you scared when they had you?" "Yes, Daddy. I was very scared, but you did not show it." Lily shook her head. "Grandma said you could be scared and still be brave. You could be scared and still be kind. The scare part is just a feeling. The brave part and the kind part are choices." She went back to her drawing, adding more stars around the sad-eyed alien scientist. David watched her and said nothing that he knew, somehow, that his daughter had done something extraordinary aboard that ship. He did not know what. He would probably never know the details. But he knew that the war had ended, and his daughter had come home, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, an alien commander had decided that humanity was too dangerous to fight. Not because humans were violent, not because humans were strong, because a 7-year-old girl had been kind to her captors, and that kindness had terrified them more than any weapon ever could. Outside the kitchen window, the sun set over New Promise. The sky turned orange and pink and finally deep blue. Stars appeared one by one, scattered across the darkness like seeds waiting to grow. Lily finished her drawing and held it up to the light. "Do you think it will be okay, Daddy?" "Dr. Maville." David looked at his daughter's hopeful face and smiled. "I think it will be fine, sweetheart. Because of you." Lily nodded, satisfied. She placed the drawing carefully on the refrigerator, where it would stay for years to come. The sad-eyed alien surrounded by stars, a reminder of the war that ended, and the child who helped end it, simply by being human.